Welcome to Let's Talk Random Archaeology Episode 5 with myself, Professor Howard Williams.
And me, Afnan and Yay!
And we're back for Episode 5 of our random exploration of all things archaeological. Now, last time we were talking about MA degrees, and particularly the MA degrees on offer in the Department of History and Archaeology at the University of Chester, and we were talking to Willie Pole and Scott Bound, two former MA Archaeology of Death and Memory students, as was Afnan herself. Yeah. And we're doing an episode 5 repeat, but we're using different victims, interviewees, in the form of two further MA Archaeology of Death and Memory. But there's a twist. The twist this time round is that one of them is a former student who's just completed, Ashley Alvarado, who's going to be joining us all the way across the pond in Texas, USA. Woo! And the other person is all the way across another sea from the Isle of Man, but he's still in Chester, which is Sammy Clegg. And Sammy Clegg is still doing his MA. He's had a bit of a deferral because of COVID and other circumstances, literally getting COVID, but then all of the challenges of that. And he's wrapping up his thesis for the MA at the moment. So we're going to be interviewing someone who's fresh off the press of having an MA, Ashley, and someone who's still in the oven, so to speak, if you want to use that sort of cooking culinary metaphor for an MA, who's still slowly simmering away, producing his hot baked thesis. So that's the plan today. And because Afnan insists on being in Japan, insists on being at the other side of the world. What we did is I talked to Ashley and Sammy, and then we're going to join up with Afnan for a wrap up to discuss any leftover or general issues about MAs, distilling the Scott, Willie and herself from the last episode and the Ashley and Sammy from this episode. So anything you'd like to say before I go off and talk to Ashley and Sammy, Afnan? Any other thoughts from last time that you think you're interested in seeing what they say or anything? I don't know.
I think it'll be really interesting to have a listen to the different perspectives of the MA. I know they're coming from very different backgrounds, and they're approaching it in a different way. And I think, like we said before, the MA is very versatile. So I really do look forward to seeing how they're going to approach this and approach the question. So please enjoy it. I'll be insisting on my Japanese-ness over here. So.
And Afnan will be back with all her Japanese-ness at the very end, where we shall discuss, how it all went. Right, I'll be off to find Ashley, and I'm joined today by Ash Alvarado, who's one of my former MA Archaeology of Death and Memory students. Hi, Ash.
Hello.
And I thought we could have a natter about all your experiences of doing the master's degree, but also to learn a little bit, so my listeners can learn a little bit. I know a little bit about you, but hopefully I can learn a bit, but also listeners can learn a bit about who you are, where you come from, what you're doing now, and all that type of thing. So first up, where are you from and who are you, Ash?
Oh, gosh. Well, I'm Ash Alvarado, and I'm from Austin, Texas. And it has its ups and downs, but, Austin's, I guess, located in a slightly more exciting part of Texas. I guess it depends on who you ask, though. I am a former MA student. 2019, 2020 was my
fresh.
Year. I'm pretty fresh. And I have an undergraduate degree from Texas State University in San Marcos, Texas, which is maybe roughly 45 minutes outside of Austin.
Okay. You came from an archaeology or anthropology background before you did the master's?
Yes. So at like most universities in the U.S., we have most of our archaeology degrees are under the anthropology curriculum. So here we kind of do the four-way path. So we have cultural anthropology, bio anthropology, then linguistics, and then of course archaeology. And so I ended up focusing on archaeology under an anthropology bachelor's with a minor in fine arts.
Oh, cool. So you did get a bit of everything, but you got a focus on the archaeology as you went along. That was your passion. How much of it was sort of American Southwest archaeology, or was it global? What kind of stuff did you get up to?
Well, I think they tried to focus the students in the region that they're in. Unfortunately, most of the European archaeology would probably fall under the history department. Is probably where you get the bulk of at least I guess the research aspect of it. For methods, definitely stay in the anthropology department, but they did tend to focus on southwestern archaeology as well as archaeology of Mexico.
Yeah.
So I got a lot of that, and I ended up focusing predominantly on iconography while I was in undergraduate studies. So that kind of took me into mostly Mexico and then parts, like maybe like the lower southwest regions of the U.S.
Oh, nice stuff. I've never learned any of that. Obviously I read bits and bobs, and but it's a completely different, literally a completely different world of archaeology, and but it's fun stuff. And you get to. That's not exactly a tiny region. I mean, it's regionally focused, but in region it's bigger than most of Western Europe, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, most of the professors at Texas State tend to either focus in the American Southwest or various parts of Mexico or Peru, and we have I think we have one that maybe ventures into Africa, but I didn't take very many classes with this individual, so I don't want to say for sure what area they were focusing on without knowing.
well, I must say I'm learning a lot more about American Southwest via TikTok now that I follow certain TikTok archaeologists, including Navajo Rocks, who's a Navajo archaeologist who does lots of really cool stuff about sort of Mayan archaeology, but also the American Southwest Pueblo archaeology and stuff like that. But I, as a professor of archaeology, I shouldn't admit to so much ignorance of vast areas of the archaeological field. But we all specialise in particular things, and it's whatever degree you do archaeology, wherever you have different sort of get different interests. So what particular iconography stuff did you interest in? Did you do a dissertation, or is it more just a special subject areas that you do as an undergraduate?
Well, what we have here is we can tend to just continue to focus specifically on one area or an area with a specialty, and then you can always go on to write I guess I don't want to say a senior dissertation if you'd like, but you really have to start that, I think, maybe your sophomore year. Start sussing out professors that you want to work with and start talking to them. And I will say, unfortunately, going into my undergraduate, just like with my MA, I was definitely already an older student, and a lot of stuff I found out kind of after the fact. So I wasn't able to do a senior thesis, if you will, as much as I would have wanted to. But I have some friends who did it, and it seems really awesome. I do think that if anyone is listening and they are a student in the U.S., definitely go out of your way to do that senior thesis if you can, because I think that would have been excellent preparation going into a master's degree.
Well, that's the next thing I was going to ask you about, because I mean, so why a master's degree at all, and why did you come to the University of Chester? Why, Ash? Why? I mean, no, I didn't mean like that, but why? Sorry.
Well, oh no. I mean, these are excellent questions, and I think these are things that people should consider when they are going forward. I'm not 100% sure, and you can always let me know how the necessity works for an MA or even a PhD in the UK to work in archaeology. But I suspect that it's a little similar. That if you want to move any further, really, within the field of archaeology, past maybe a field technician, you really want to have your master's degree, because that's a lot of states will require different companies doing cultural resource management to have at least one individual with a master's degree. Funnily enough, it doesn't matter what the focus was, as long as it's a master's in archaeology or anthropology, which I always found a little interesting. But that's kind of your starting point out of just being a shovel bum, essentially. Because I've worked with individuals who, after I graduated with my undergrad, who were already in their 40s, going into their 50s, that were still just field technicians. And every now and then they may have been saddled with the responsibility of crew chief, but they were never given any opportunity to advance further than that, strictly because they didn't have that piece of paper. So I have a lot of mixed feelings about that, because a lot of these individuals have a wealth of knowledge and experience. But So I guess if you're looking strictly from a just wanting to get work standpoint,
Yeah.
the master's degree is definitely something that you will need to advance any further than just digging shovel test. But also, on with that being said, if you are thinking that you want to go on to teach or hold a higher position um, in a museum or any sort of educational institution and just kind of being the authority, and you just really love archaeology and you cannot get enough of researching and interpretation and just spending every day discovering new things, and I think a master's degree and even a PhD are um, options that you should consider.
That's really good. So, I mean, it's never a single reason for doing a master's degree, and I think that's really important, whether it's career, whether it's teaching, or whether it's a more advanced qualification to give yourself an edge in transferring to another area. It can be quite versatile. But I mean, why the UK? Why not stay in the US? Was that a financial thing, or was it a specialist thing? What was your take?
Well, to be fair, I could say it's definitely it's cheaper in the UK. I guess it depends on the path you take.
Yeah,
I definitely used all the money I possibly could so that I didn't have to work while I was there for the year, which kind of could maybe even out technically with the conversion rate, if you will. But I think the UK is definitely. I love that it's only a year long, but that's also, people have to keep in mind that it's a year to basically do an entire master's dissertation. Whereas in the States, people are doing, it takes them between 2, maybe 3 years at the long point. But you're supposed to be able to at least have 2 years. So, like the first half year, from what I understand from some of my coworkers who are in the process of getting their MA, where I currently work. They're like the first half year to full year is basically just all the classes to kind of get them prepped. And then the
yeah,
last year, the second year, you will, is just entirely spent on writing your dissertation. Whereas in the UK, it's like you have just, here's a few months of, here are your modules, and then write some
yeah.
papers. And then also you have the next 6 or so months, depending if you're like me and you have to have an extension to kind of get that done. So I do think it can be a little more stressful, but I also feel like it helps prepare you in other ways to maybe work under the gun, if you will, or to work under really, 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 really strict deadlines.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there's a balance to it. But the UK definitely had more programs that were of interest to me, which is the ultimate reason I ended up going there. I realized that on top of iconography, I had a love of just European history and just the general like folklore and stories that I grew up with and that I indulged in, and I wanted to kind of broaden my horizons, if you will. Not that I have anything against the American Southwest or the archaeology of Mexico. There's so many stories and rich folklore there as well, but I really just wanted to specialize in mortuary archaeology to some degree, and I felt like I was really going to get the opportunity to explore more about that in the UK versus here in the States, because finding specific degrees related to funerary studies in general are very, very limited. And if we do have them, they're strictly, predominantly forensics, like in the
Yes.
forensics departments. And not that that's not fascinating, but it wasn't necessarily the path I wanted to go with it.
So, I mean, obviously, we do a unique archaeology of death and memory MA, but you can't do that anywhere else. But there are other places you can do more bioarchaeology, forensic archaeology, of course. So yeah, it was different. It took you into new territory. That's fair enough. So what did you make of the degree itself? What was the best things and what were the difficulties? I mean, obviously you were COVID affected. Was obviously one of the things. But I mean, what about your other impressions?
Well, I didn't really know what to expect. I was actually had an adult job. That's what I call it. I was working in the exhibits department at our Texas State History Museum here
Of
in
course.
Austin. Yeah, and I was on a path where I was like, this could be it. This could just be my career. And after about a year of doing it, I just realized that I missed I missed archaeology, and I wanted to be able to get back into that, and maybe utilize my skills in a different way than building and designing exhibits and going about it that way. Not that that's not amazing. It's there's so many things you can do with your archaeology degree. So I hope kids knew that. But when I decided that I wanted to have that a different focus, and that focus was something more aligned um, with what I found at Chester, and that was the degree in death and memory. And it seemed like the different theories that were introduced to me there were, a lot of them were just brand new, and I honestly never heard of them before. So it was a really exciting time for me. Not that it wasn't laced with difficulty, but overall, I learned a lot of new ways to think outside of, I think, what we're normally taught as undergraduate archaeologists.
Okay, so you have sort of it got you new ideas, new perspectives. What was the more challenging things for you, did you find, whether because you are coming from a different training background or because it was just a new level of study?
I think it was a combination of things. Again, I had been out of academia for, I think, going on 5 years when I started. So I was definitely rusty. So if there's anybody thinking of going back after, a couple of years, several years in my case, try not to be too hard on yourself, because I definitely was. And I think that that was part of it, maybe tripped me up my first term
Okay.
while I was there, was that I was just, I was so used to coming in from my undergrad where I just felt like I knew everything and I was on top of everything. And then I decided to, do this MA in a year after 5 years of being in school. And it was just kind of an overwhelming process at the beginning. But, you eventually start to find your footing, and it's always better late than never, in my opinion.
I remember you beat yourself up quite early on about how you weren't doing so well, but then we also have, and this is nothing about Chester, this is about the UK system, this needlessly cruel and contrasting grading system from the US, where students come to us. I remember I've seen this over 20 plus years of and students coming in shaking and in tears going, I got 70%, and I go, yeah, that's top mark, well done. Is that good? Yeah, that's really good. Or 60 or 55 or something. That's really good, solid. But MA level, getting a 50, getting 50s, getting 60s. These are show really solid, really tight. We've done the research, and they think they failed. And no. It's good results. But yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, we should. The UK grading system, it's not just about the fact it's different from the US, but it sucks for everyone and it doesn't make sense. So I have every sympathy with US students coming into the UK system, because if they called it ABC or whatever, that would be, at least people would know that it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So I will not muster a defence of that, and I think it's traumatized US and other international students over decades. So I think that can be tough as well. I don't know if that applies to you, but I just thought I'd say that for anyone listening.
Well, I think it's there's a lot that you're learning in the process of learning and, I guess, doing a degree. So you're learning a lot of it's a lot of minor things, really, kind of like the grading system that, you eventually learn how to roll with, and you eventually learn how to, what it means. And so that's eventually one thing under your belt. But then behind that, sometimes it feels like there's just a slew of other little things that you're like, oh wait, how does that work? Wait, what is that? Or how do I get a hold of this person? Or what do I do? Do I camp outside of their office and wait? Or what is too many emails? Like, how does this work? So you just kind of overwhelm yourself with a bunch of different things, just trying to make sure that you don't come off sounding like a complete idiot. And I think that was always my biggest fear. I was like, how do I sound competent? Do I sound coherent? And there are days definitely where I could honestly say, no, I don't think you do. And I think that you need to reassess what it is you're trying to say. But, you can get stuck in your head. And I think that is a common issue for a lot of not just master's students, but undergraduate students as well. So it's kind of a trial and error thing. And I think the important thing is not giving up. And definitely pick out the professors, because they'll make themselves known, that usually are available and will do their best to, guide you along the way. And I will say that you were that professor for me.
Yay!
like, no, I know that you didn't end up being my my dissertation supervisor,
Oh,
but
that's true, actually.
you're because at the last second, Amy kind of showed me some stuff and swayed me a different direction.
Oh. Tell us a little bit about that, and what did you do for your dissertation in the end?
Well, I ended up really getting into sensory archaeology, and because this was such a new concept for me, which while studying it, I remember Tom and I would joke that a lot of it just seems so what's the word? Just so common sense. Like, yeah, why wouldn't you want to try to put some emotion or uh, any sensory perspective in what you're doing? It seemed like it made sense, but at least for myself, that's not necessarily something we focus on here in the States. And Tom, having his background in art, I think it was a new concept for him as well.
And
Sorry.
for listeners' benefit, Tom's also been interviewed on the ArchaeoDeath channel in an earlier video. I'll put a link in the description. Yes, because he was in the same year as you, wasn't he? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for the introduction. I was about to do the same thing.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yours was much better than mine. Do not worry. But so it made me want to start. It inspired me, I should say, to start. Trying to approach everything that I was studying from that particular perspective. And I had been looking at these catacomb bodies that were distributed, not necessarily just in the regions of like Bavaria and Germany, but predominantly there. And they're just these fascinating constructions that I just felt absolutely compelled to invest further in and kind of do my best, I should say, to apply a sensory approach to that by investigating their sensory affordances, their utilization. And I think I tried to cram a lot into that dissertation. I ended up just kind of going down a rabbit hole. And they always tell you not to go back and read your master's dissertation, maybe even your PhD thesis, because that's when you start to notice, oh, wow, I could use better punctuation here, or that entire chapter probably would have been better here. So you just kind of go through and rip it apart. But overall, I think when I go back and read it, I'm pretty proud of it. It was a kind of a heavy piece of work, and it definitely gave me more to build upon if I decided to go forward with it in the future. And it also, I think, kind of sets up work, or at least approaches for other individuals who choose to apply sensory approaches to other either new material assemblages or pre-existing ones.
So, was there any sort of takeaway points you can share about your results you think are different or distinctive?
Well, let me think about that. The difficult part is that it's definitely when people are coming into contact with any sort of religious material culture, it's meant to serve a specific purpose. And I also don't necessarily believe that there's one single takeaway from something. And these particular catacomb bodies, I feel, were so layered, like heavily layered with just multiple meanings, and based off not just from the retrieval, but then their decoration, and then where they were placed within villages or cathedrals, or even small little chapels. Everything had a different meaning and a different way of being approached depending on which community was investing in it.
Yeah.
So I think overall, it's more about just when you're looking at something, not taking it at face value and really trying to look at the multiple meanings behind something, because that's what its purpose is. It's to get you to maybe think outside of the box. It's to get you to, and in the cases of these bodies, to believe in a life after death, to kind of continue to feel spiritually guided and invest in your faith and whatever that may be. But again, the interesting thing about them, or one of the many interesting things, was that they were, depending on where they were, in which town or which community, there was a lot of blending of strict Catholicism with regional folklore and regional beliefs. So you have like a blending of ideas as well, which you find in
Yes.
you find in other cultures too. And I think a really interesting one that could be a totally other topic would be Santa Muerte in regions of Mexico, like the way that you have like the like folk Catholicism. So there's a lot of interesting nuances to these bodies, and I think that the more you invest in I guess in your engagement with them or other material objects, you can kind of really experience a different world, if you will, or a different mindset outside of your present time.
Fascinating. So you've obviously completed the MA successfully, but it obviously equally obviously the COVID situation on both sides of the Atlantic has affected everything. But you got it in, you got it done. What have you been up to since?
Oh well, since being home, after I did finish my dissertation from home, and I will say the COVID was a bit of a bummer because I really wanted to be able to take a trip to Germany and kind of, actually visit some of these sites myself and maybe talk to individuals that, maybe were still in charge of, their care. So that wasn't necessarily something I was able to do. So everything was pretty much just like book research and delving through internet archives and utilizing the resources that were on the online database from the University of Chester,
Yeah.
and whatever weird places, weird odds and ends of the internet I could find information that was acceptable and appropriate. But once I got through all of that, I have been spending my time trying to. I guess I spent my time trying to figure out what my next move was going to be.
Sure.
But that usually ended up being, well, I probably should find work. So I was kind of on the job hunt shortly after I submitted my dissertation. I did take I will admit, a couple of weeks off just to recoup mentally. But after that, I started looking for work. And I'm sure it's probably similar in the UK. The job market here hasn't been super great.
No.
Especially in specialized fields. So the competition for positions can be really, really stiff. But I ended up doing some field work for a former company that I worked for right out of my undergrad, and I did a couple of cultural resource management projects with them.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it took me to Kentucky and Indiana. It wasn't, it's not the most glamorous lifestyle. I think CRM is something you either really love or you really hate, and that's up to the individual to kind of figure out how they feel about it. But I do think it's excellent experience, at least for a budding archaeologist, if they, want to get some work under their belt. CRM firms are typically the easiest ones to become employed with right out of an undergraduate degree, at least here in the States.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean that they're automatically going to hire you. They want to know that you have a couple of qualifications.
Sure.
But that usually just means making sure you have your field school under your belt and have definitely graduated with, anthropology, archaeology. Every now and then they'll take a history or a biology degree, but I think that's really specific and depends on what the company might have a need for. But I did that for a little while, and then things kind of dried up as far as projects go, and that kind of left me for about a month kind of figuring out where I was going to go after that. And then I reached out to an old professor of mine at Texas State University, who was one of my basically archaeological curation professors. And I asked if I could just come and volunteer. That's something that I'll stress to a lot of individuals if maybe they're finding it difficult to find or maintain a steady job or just general employment. If you want to stick in the field that you're in, maybe reach out to institutions that you maybe did volunteer work for in the past and just kind of get your foot back in the door there. So you don't become too rusty with what you already can do. And there's always going to be room to gain new skills as well. So I ended up doing that, and she basically CC'd their new project archaeologist on it. And I thought that I was just going to be doing volunteer work for them. but it turned out that it was a job, which
right.
yeah, which is always a nice way to go about it. You think you're volunteering, and then they're like, "Oh, we're going to pay you this amount of money." And in the back of your mind, you're like, "Oh, I guess I'm employed now." Not not everything is that easy or that cryptic, but that's just kind of what ended up happening to me. And I've been on this project for the past going on 5 months, and it is
good.
it's a I'm doing the laboratory, basically quality control aspect of it. So it's out of the field. So it's kind of it's a lot different than what I'm used to. So with that being said, I'm learning a lot as I go along, but still able to utilize a lot of the skills I gained, predominantly the research skills I gained from my time at Chester, to be able to go forward and rummage through field notes and shovel test records and the artifact bags. Because when you're building an inventory and databases for research projects, sometimes you have to play detective, and that's when you'll be really thankful for your MA degree and having to spend all that time sifting through odds and ends to piece things together. So that's currently what I'm doing, and I've recently um, potentially, I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but
Sure.
potentially about to start a different job with the same company, but kind of on an opposite end of it, and that's getting back into curatorial services. So working for their repository and updating their backlog collections, incoming collections, and I believe there'll be some working with veterans along with this program. So things are starting to work out, and this would be a full-time position potentially. So the one I'm on right now currently is technically a temporary lab position, but
Well, I think I can hear a very hungry cat in the background there. But I was going.
I apologize.
No, it's fine. It's good. It adds atmosphere to the whole thing. No, I just this is not a howling wolf or a sort of something that sounds like it might just devour you. Though it sounds.
That's Crookshanks, and he doesn't like closed doors. So
Ah.
he'll eventually tire himself out and maybe wander away for a bit. At least that's my hope. He can be very stubborn sometimes.
Well, fair enough, but no, I was going to say that you're always so optimistic and so enthusiastic, and I remember you from your time with us at it's hardly surprised to hear that you're making yourself indispensable with various projects, and you've been able to sort of jump back across the Atlantic and find your feet again after the Masters. But it's always a time of uncertainty. I mean, I suppose it's difficult to, especially in this COVID times, it's difficult to know exactly what's going to be going on. But it sounds so great to hear that you've found your feet with all this project, and there might be sort of more work coming. So that's very exciting.
Yeah, it's not to say that I'm not human and I don't have days where I just want to, crawl into bed and cry, and I might have done that a couple of times. But I think it's for me, it's important personally just to kind of get my emotions out that I'm feeling and then move on from them.
Yeah.
Because I feel like if I kind of, my cat agrees. Sorry. If I wade in them too much, then I'll definitely, that's when I get off track, and I try really, really hard not to do that, because it's definitely not easy, especially as you know, and I think as the UK is seen, working in any branch or area field of the humanities. I feel like we always get hit first and the hardest when it comes to funding or cuts. It's the same here in the States, and it's constant work to have to feel or to have to remind people why you're valid, while what the work you're doing is valid and why it's important. So on top of just trying to find a job, you're also battling against just, what feels like sometimes a predetermined mindset from outer forces that might have more control over, the funding that goes into a particular industry, which will ultimately affect whether they can even consider employing you. So you're fighting an uphill battle sometimes. So optimism definitely helps. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but every now and then a nice beer A nice beer helps relax.
It's allowed to say that. That's
Yeah, I
perfectly
just,
allowed.
I don't want to, I'm not condoning, developing a drinking problem, but, sometimes you need to go out and just, have a night with your friends and just honestly complain sometimes. Have a little
Absolutely.
drink.
A
And just,
mixture of optimism and a complaining. I think Cruikshank is embodying your inner wine of
yeah.
the inner angst of behind your positive exterior, your upbeat demeanor. There is this sort of noise.
I really am quite sorry. I apologize. I didn't think
No. I think it's wonderful. It's what it's like the sort of what archaeologists are like. We're so passionate and enthusiastic about our subjects and our work, and then we have these moments where we just howl.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely feels that way sometimes. And I mean, you're constantly learning new stuff, and so it's good to maintain a level of humility as well when you're going forward with things. I'm running into that even with the job that I'm working. Just every day, I feel like, yeah, I figured something out in Excel. I'm a god, and then the next day it all goes wrong, or there's a whole new thing that needs to be done that your boss, your supervisor, has put on you, which is great because they're like, yeah, I trust this person to get it done, but inside you're just like, I don't know. So it's going forward. You're constantly going to be learning new things on top of what you already know, which for me, I think that's great. Without learning in life is kind of boring.
Exactly. Well, it's been absolutely wonderful talking to you, Ash, about all your time before, during, and after your MA. And I wish you so much the best for moving forward. And I'm sure that you're gonna go on to more and exciting things. And it's always there's always uncertainties, but there's always hope with archaeology. And you've inspired me to sort of look on the optimistic side. And although I have my Cruikshank moments of sort of
Yeah.
of howling, but no, seriously, it's wonderful to talk to you, and thank you so much for sharing your perspectives. I think it'll be very valuable for future potential MA students to hear your take on it, whether they come to Chester or they go elsewhere. I think it's good to hear a balanced view, and thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me, and it's been great just to catch up in general. I'll do my best to not be a stranger in the future. And if anything more exciting pops up, I don't know, like a random PhD that I decide to go for, I will, definitely keep you in the loop on that.
Oh yes, we've got our ideas, haven't we? But we won't share in case anyone steals them. We won't share them on this particular podcast.
I
But
will.
we've got our schemes. You never know what will happen. And but yeah, we'll keep in touch, Ash. But for now, I'll say farewell.
Yes, and I'll say adios.
So our next conversation is with current master student Sammy Clegg. Hi, Sammy.
Hello. How are you?
I'm all right, actually. So I've been quizzing various former MA students, but you're slightly different in many ways, but particularly in regards to the fact you're just still wrapping up your master's, the MA in Archaeology of Death and Memory at the University of Chester. So I wanted to ask you, who you are and what you did before you did the master's degree, but then obviously to sort of quiz you a little bit further about the current circumstances of what it's like as it's very raw for you still writing up. So first of all, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So hello, my name's Sammy. I've been at Chester for 4 years. I started in 2017 when I did an undergrad, and that was combined history and archaeology. But I think about halfway through my second year, I realised I think I'd rather be an archaeologist. So I jumped shipped when I could on the MA, and then it kind of went from there. I've stuck on with the MA Archaeology of Death and Memory. But before that, I'm actually from the Isle of Man. So I don't know, I don't think I'm that foreign, but I'm a Manxman. But I came straight from my A-levels in 2017, which I think is kind of the most direct path a lot of people take, but not everyone. But I studied history, politics, computer science, and music for my A-levels.
Okay.
But before that, I don't think I'd really had any exposure to archaeology as a kind of point of study. There'd been opportunities to get involved in my museum, and then I had some work experience there where the idea, like the chance to be hands-on with objects was great. And I think time team is such a cliche answer to exposure. Whether or not all that kind of directed me towards it, I don't know. It kind of boiled down to the UCAS point. I thought, I like history, but I want to do something practical. So I went from there. I mean, we've talked about this before as well. My mum was pregnant with me in a house which had a Neolithic chambered tomb in the garden. So whether there was some kind of predestination before I was born about going into archaeology, I don't.
So it's in his blood. The force of the Neolithic is there.
It was called. There's some kind of spiritual predestination about where I've ended up. But it's all gone from there.
I mean, I often wonder, to be honest, about why I did archaeology, and I did have a childhood interest. Yeah, it's pre-time team in my case, but yeah, documentaries, your Michael Woods and your John Romers on TV and stuff, and then going to archaeological sites. There's no single thing though, and there was not a moment, a road to Damascus moment of then I realized I had to be an archaeologist or nothing would matter ever again. No, it was never like that. But I think things do. You're led by interests and a range of influences from media, books. I think that's a good answer. So why the MA though? I mean, why stay on in Chester? Was it COVID related, or was it because it allowed you to pursue interests that you hadn't finished or fulfilled? Or
I don't know. I think there's two ways of looking at it. In one sense, yeah, I think it was COVID related. There was certainly sort of an easiness to go straight into doing it. Rather than going straight into commercial archaeology, which is, I know, a lot of people from my year on the undergrad in Chester have gone into, and they're still doing it now and they're loving it. But I think I just had a general interest, and I do want to pursue it, and I do want to go further, and that's something I still want to do. But I think it was just that initial interest, and having the opportunity to have been with the lecturers before going on the MA, you kind of you know their interests, but you also develop your own research interest, and you are in some way informed about what they're kind of persuading you to look at and things like that. And then from there, I think the MA just gives you enough freedom to be directed, but be open enough to do what you want to do. So like with the research questions, actually I remember in your death and burial in undergrad, I remember we had two questions, and I thought one of them you said, this is way too vague, but no, it wasn't. It was directed in a sense, but you had your own kind of period that you go off and pursue, and I think that's represented now in the MA. You can go and do what you want to do, but you've got fantastic guidance by people for me who I'd already met, I already knew, and I already liked being around, so it was great.
So you're in a group of like-minded students. Not everyone in your year obviously went on to do an MA, but you've got people around you, as well as students.
Oh, well, yeah, there were 6 of us my undergrad year who've stayed on, and it's brilliant now because you can have all sorts of banter as well, but we all get on, we all do our work, and it's good as well for discussions as well when you're able to go in. But I think that kind of dynamic just exists when you do an MA anyway, because everybody wants to be there. Everybody's kind of got the background knowledge of enough to be able to discuss certain things and bring in different kind of dimensional aspects and contribute in different ways.
So, but building off what you've already said, you said that, like my death and burial course, which is, for those listening who don't know, it's a final year undergraduate module. It was a bit of a way in for you.
That definitely led into this. It definitely led into the death and memory for me and a couple of others. And it just, a lot of the reading and the research and the stuff that we covered was in some ways the same, but went in a little bit more depth. And it was a really good, nice setup to kind of go from, third year in Chester to go straight into, okay, this is what we're doing at the Masters. We've already found it interesting. Let's go and pursue this a little bit more. And I mean, the themes are applicable, across periods as well, which is, it's been actually really, really, really handy.
So cool. And how does it work in terms of, you also pointing out that the content workload is more, independent with Masters.
Definitely.
I mean, is that the principal difference in your mind at this stage, or because you've done all the talk parts and you're just wrapping up the dissertation now, aren't you? I mean, how does it feel? Does it feel like when you're an undergraduate doing your undergraduate dissertation, or does it feel like a completely new world?
I think it feels like another world. I really, really, really do. And in many ways, I'm loving it because I can kind of go off, I can direct myself, and like for this dissertation, I think it's something like 16,000 words we've got.
Yeah.
So there's enough scope to be able to go in and draw in different aspects like ethnography and things, or the multidisciplinary research which you can draw on, which I didn't have enough time to be able to do when I was doing my undergrad. So it is a lot more self-driven. There is a lot more go off and you do this yourself. But it's a lot of you're pursuing your own interests in doing it, which I think is the massive difference between you are somewhat restricted in your undergrad because you've got criteria to meet. You've got to do this in so many words. But you're doing what you want to do. You're researching what you want to do, and you're coming up with, or at least I'm finding new things that haven't necessarily been looked at and things that I'd like to go into and pursue. So I think it's great just having the freedom to be able to go and direct yourself.
Fantastic. Are you, obviously you've had a bit of a deferral because of you had COVID, but also the practicalities of COVID circumstances.
Yeah, long COVID. Oh yeah, it was grim. Yeah. I had that in August, but I'm hopefully going to be finished by December. So it's November now when we're filming, and all being well, we'll get there. But I don't really know if COVID was so much of a reason why. It's half whether I did go in to do the MA because of that, or whether because I just had the interest that was set up from the undergrad.
Yeah. But it's you're in a situation where maybe you don't want to share with us the details of your ongoing research, or are you willing to let people know a little bit of an area?
So this is all kind of developed from I don't really know where it's developed. It's just by reading around. So what I'm really interested in now are these sensory archaeologies and your approaches, and a lot of this comes from phenomenology and how experiencing the landscape. But what I'm particularly interested in is, well, we can't begin to define or interpret Neolithic monuments, and I speak broadly of monuments and all kind of monument types, until we know how they were experienced.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at three kind of aspects which have already been looked at, but I think we need to go further, which are texture, which has been looked at by Vicky Cummings.
Yeah.
Looking at visuals as well, which is again to an extent Cummings, but Chris Tilley, Andrew Jones. Who else has done visuals? Oh, Archaeoptics, fantastic, by Aaron Watson. And then I'm looking at sound as well by Watson and Kettering and all sorts. So it's really, really interesting what I'm doing. But I'm trying to look at, instead of looking at them from one aspect, kind of interpret them by, well, they're experience multisensory. So they're all different aspects. So for example, there's visual textures. So what's the meaning of seeing different textures and seeing different lights? I don't know, Maze Howe, for an example, there's Quantiness and Coines in Scotland, there's suggestions that there's been burning in the chambers. So how does that relate to the texture of the tombs? Like, do we see different textures dancing, shadow lights, and what does this mean? Or say the Ring of Broadgar, for example, can we begin to look at shadows, and what do these shadows mean when they're cast in solstice times and things like that? So yeah, it's really it's loads of fun. I mean, I'm a musician as well, so I've played a trombone since I was 4, which has kind of fed into me really wanting to pursue sound.
Wow, yes.
I think it's fantastic. I mean, I saw something as well the other day, just because I had the freedom to go about to doing it, which was a Carnax, which is these Bronze Age big blowhorn. Oh, I'm desperate to get on one then. I think that'd be good fun. But yeah, these sensory aspects are really what I'm interested in at the minute.
So that's fantastic, and I look forward to very much. It all sounds a bit hippie-ish to me in my early medieval interest, but it's all good stuff because we need to understand these monuments, not only the funerary functions, but also the broader experiential.
How we operated outside the mortuary sphere as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, good luck with the final stages of your dissertation, which is only for listeners' benefit. That's only part of the MA. You do the tour elements, different modules, and then move on to the dissertation. But beyond acquiring at some point in your life a Carnax so that you can annoy neighbours till their eardrums bleed, do you have any other plans of what you might be doing afterwards, or are things a little in the air until you get this thesis done?
I think archaeology is 100% on the cards. I'd love to come back to academia at some point, but I think for now I'd like the chance just to go off and get a bit of experience doing other things. I think being a student as well for 4 years would be quite nice to go out and earn some money as well. But
yes, of course.
I mean, with what's going on now with development works with HS2, for example, there's so many commercial archaeology jobs being called for. And what was found the other day with that Roman head sculpture. That Norman church, that was fantastic. So I mean, the fact the fact that that's been drawn to public attention as well just highlights the fantastic work that there is opportunities to go into commercial archaeology. But I mean, even doing the masters, we had the opportunity to continue heritage, and I think the opportunity to get into a heritage scheme as well would be great. So there's so many things that I want to do, but there's only so many I can do.
Well, we shall see. And thank you so much, Sammy, for joining me in this conversation, because I think it all adds to a picture for prospective future MA students to reflect, and perhaps people who've been out of academia who are thinking of coming back to it, you know, particularly, as well as, you know, undergraduates at the moment who might think about an MA. You know, it's really for them to get a sense of different perspectives from our MA students and what they think about their current or recent courses and what they've been planning to do or are doing afterwards. So thank you so much, Sammy, for your input.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Okay, so that was Ashley and Sammy's perspectives on the MA Archaeology of Death and Memory at the University of Chester. So Afnan, back to you with your Japaneseness all the way from sunny Japan. You just had an earthquake, which hasn't not. You survived that. Good. You know, we don't have many earthquakes here in North Wales. Good. Oh, good. I'm glad to hear it. You know, nothing fell off the walls there anyway.
Oh no.
So you know, we've done 2 long episodes, talked to yourself and 4 others. So hopefully together this gives any prospective student for Chester's MA subjects, or indeed for anywhere else, a general sense. But I mean, what is your overall takeaways from all of this? Is there anything that surprised you, first of all, about what Ashley and Sammy said?
In terms of surprising, I guess like everything is surprising in that like everyone has a different like attitude towards the MA, and what they want to take from the MA is always different.
Yes.
And I do think that is, I mean, I guess you could call it surprising, because it's like, oh, I actually didn't think about that, or I never even that didn't come to mind or anything like that. And I did really like that. So I studied my MA with Scott and with Willie, so I know that their approaches, what they wanted to gain from it. And I actually ventured a little bit with Scott and yourself while he was doing research. So I liked that the experiences that Ashley and Sammy had were very different from the ones that maybe like me, Willie, and Scott had. And of course, I feel so bad for Sammy. He's like having such a hard time.
Yeah, I mean, he is another one. Like you and Scott, he was an undergraduate with us. Willie's more like Ashley. I mean, different countries, Canada, USA, but coming across the pond and, you know, trying to experience the UK situation. Ashley didn't bring a hound with her, didn't bring a pug. You know, I think, you know, that's not compulsory, it seems. You know, you don't have to do that. I think. But my point is, you know, but even so, you're all coming from different perspectives. I mean, Sammy's not even from the UK. He's from the wild, separate island of the Isle of Man, which exists without laws, the lawless Irish Sea. I'm teasing, of course they have laws there. I've been there and I didn't get mugged or anything. It's very nice place.
Good to know.
And wonderful prehistory and Viking archaeology and so many cool things there. But anyway, I'm digressing as usual. But yeah, I think it's very difficult to imagine what it must be like doing an MA through a pandemic. And I think it was a real tough thing. Yes, to achieve. And Ashley sort of finished off in the pandemic too. So yes, it's all a bit of a mess really. But they're doing very well. And our new MA students, we've got another new batch of them, and they're doing really well too. Yeah, they're really happy. But so some from archaeology backgrounds, some from history backgrounds. We've got a Norwegian MA student coming from an archaeology background, and you know, so she's into a Viking. Surprise! Nice. You know, so they're a real fun bunch. But you know, it's still a disrupted time until we're supposed to be back face to face teaching after Christmas, fully allegedly. But it's still very disrupted, and you know. But
I think, of course, I think it's not going to, you know, magically become easier over time. I think like it's going to be a struggle until it's fixed, until we kind of understand what's going on with the whole COVID thing and the pandemic. But like taking the pandemic aside, I do think that it can, well, actually not really taking it aside. So like, let's talk about the pandemic. I think that it can really motivate people, or it can really demotivate people. And I think that in this situation, I feel like while like I feel like me, Willie, and Scott had a really easy time kind of coasting through our MA. Maybe for Ashley and Sammy, it really wasn't like that, and they really needed to pick up that motivation themselves, which is what's great about the MA. It gives you that freedom to pick up your motivation if you want to.
But I think there is an issue there about how it all works out and how the place interacts with the program, with the personalities, with your cohort of students.
Yeah.
There's so many variables that you can't predict, and all you can really control is your effort, your engagement. And sometimes that lapses and you just can't get.
Yeah, well, I think like that's the thing. I think with every step, like I guess as a wrap up, like with every step from your undergraduate, you think, man, this is really tough and it's really hard. And then you step up to your MA and you're like, oh God, that was play. Like that was so easy. Now I have to really step it up. And then like you're like, racking your head, this is so difficult. And then you maybe, and if you're lucky enough, or if you are motivated enough, you go ahead and do your PhD. And then you're like, man,
we're not trying to put people off here. We're just trying to be realistic here.
Yeah, it's important to be realistic.
Where am I going with this? I suppose the point is we're not trying to put people off. We're just trying to say that it's stages of developing your confidence, developing your knowledge, developing your expertise, and it's always a new challenge at every stage.
Yeah, and I think with that, like you are developing your skills. So it's not like, oh God, like you're starting from scratch. You're not. Like you worked hard on your undergraduate, so you can use those skills for your MA, but your MA is a step up too. So you need to also step up. And the same with your PhD. It's like the skills that you're using in your MA are the skills you need for your PhD. You just need to, develop them, improve them,
Or for surviving earthquakes in Japan, as depending on what you end up doing.
It's so scary. Like, I know this isn't, but it's so scary. I'm still not used to them. I've been here for almost 2 years and I still can't. Like, the minute the shakes start, I'm like, where is the closest table? So.
Wow. Well, there you are.
There you go. Amazing in a nutshell.
Well, thank you very much yet again. We'll be back for another discussion in due course about something different, but we've taken you on a 5-episode journey through various perspectives, and we're thankful to all our special guests who have joined us, to Willie and Scott, to Sammy and Ashley, and Afnan and I will be back. We have some other special guest ideas as well, more victims on the horizon to pounce on and interrogate via this.
Definitely.
But for now, cheerio.
See you.
For relaxing times, make it Archaeodeath time.